Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today I'm going to be doing an Infernoid deck profile. So I'm really excited for this one because it's actually like a really fun, semi-competitive rogue deck that's still topping to this day. It's been out since the beginning of the Arc V, Arc 5, saga. So this is really a fun deck to play around with. It's a super cool deck that just surprises your opponent with all sorts of stuff like Lair of Darkness and the Infernoid big monsters like Anunku and Deviati, just being able to just board wipe your opponent for whatever you need to board wipe them for. It's just a super good deck. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell next so you can become part of the notification squad, and let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Infernoid Anunku. So Anunku is a super good card in this deck that has the ability that it cannot be normal summoned or set. It must be special summoned from your hand or graveyard by banishing 3 Infernoid monsters from your hand or graveyard. And then something to keep in mind that all Infernoids share this ability is that you cannot special summon this monster as long as you control level 8 or higher on your side of the field. So like if you have more than 8 stars on your side of the field, then you can't special summon any of your Infernoid monsters, which is really cool to be able to play around with like your Link monsters and stuff like that. So it's really easy to play around, but it's just something that you kind of got to keep in mind when you're playing Infernoids. Then, when this one is summoned, when this card is special summoned, you destroy all monsters on the field. And then once per turn during either player's turn, when a spell or trap is activated, you can contribute a monster to negate the activation. If you do, banish it. Which is really cool as well because this one, if you put this Deviati on the field at the same time, which is not that hard if you have like the Void Imagination that reduces their level to 1, you can put this on the field with Lair of Darkness and be able to contribute your opponent's monsters to negate spells and traps as well, which is really good. Then we play 2 copies of Infernoid Deviati. Deviati is another really good card in this deck that basically does the exact same thing as Anunku, but when it's summoned, it board wipes all the spells and traps, which is really good because you can just summon either one that you need by banishing 3 Infernoids and then put them on the field and banish either monsters or spells and traps. But Deviati has the opposite effect where you tribute a monster to negate the activation of a monster instead of a spell or trap, which is really cool. So they're basically polar opposites, and they're both really good cards. Then I play a single copy of Ontadel. Ontadel is basically like a double attacker that you can activate its effect, and this turn it can make a second attack during each battle phase. When this card destroys an opponent's monster of a battle, it can make it a second attack. And then once per turn during either player's turn, you can tribute a monster, then target a card in your opponent's graveyard and banish it, which is really good to just be able to banish something out of their graveyard. Like they're all walking just about DD Crows. 1 copy of Semastus, you can tribute this card, or you can tribute a card your opponent controls and banish a card from their graveyard. Then it also has the ability that if this card attacks an opponent's monster, this effect activates at the end of the battle phase. You banish a card on the field, which is really good to just be able to banish like a spell card that they have, or a face down spell or trap that they have, or something like that. This Semastus is really good. A single copy of Sajet. The reason that we play a single copy of Sajet is for the Void Feast. You special summon this and 2 copies of Decatron to trigger the Void Feast. It's really good. And it also has the effect of is that when this card declares an attack, you can banish a monster from your opponent's extra deck, their choice. And then once per turn during either player's turn, you can tribute a monster, then target a card your opponent's graveyard and banish it as well. Then we play 2 copies of Petrulia. Petrulia is kind of like MST. You can banish 1 monster or 1 Infernoid to special summon this card. And then it also has the ability that you can once per turn target a spell or trap on the field and destroy it, but it can't attack the turn you activate its effect. And once per turn during your opponent's turn, you tribute a monster, then target a card in their graveyard and banish it, and it's a quick effect, which is really cool. 2 copies of Harmonic. Harmonic is a 2 of, in my opinion. Some people just play 1, but I feel like the spot removal with Harmonic, being able to destroy a monster, is really good. But it can attack the turn you destroy the monster, which kind of sucks, but, whatever, it still works. Then we play, I play 2 copies of Antra. Antra is really good to me, because being able to just target a face-up card your opponent controls and return it to their hand is really good, especially when they commit a lot of resources to it, like a Link 4 or something like that, or just baits out something. And with a 2000 defense, it's really good too. And it just requires 1 Infernoid being banished to special summon Antra. So why not play a spot removal that at least you're going to go 1 for 1 to, get rid of something. Then we play 3 copies of Decatron, which is the last 3 monsters of the main deck. We just play the Infernoids in this deck. It's kind of a pure-ish build. This card's really good that if this card is normal summon or special summoned, you can send an Infernoid monster from your deck to the grave, except another copy of itself. And if you do, increase this card's level by the level of the monster sent. And if you do, this card's name becomes that monster and replaces its own effect. So usually when you summon the Decatron, you're going to want to send a Deviati or a Anunku to the graveyard so it can negate either monsters or spells or traps. But the really cool thing about this is with Void Feast, you can activate Void Feast and then put 2 Decatrons on the field and send a Infernoid, Deviati, and Anunku to have a monster negate and spell and trap negate, and have a Sajet on the field as well, so you can go into all sorts of different plays. So it's really a good card to have on the field. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. And yes, there is actually a reason I'm not playing any hand traps in here. There is a method to this madness. So then we play a single copy of Card Destruction because we want to get our Infernoids into the graveyard as quickly as possible. And sometimes you just have a couple of them in your hand and you just want to get them in the graveyard and refill your hand with more resources that might help, because they don't care if they're in the graveyard. So I do play the 1 copy of Card Destruction. I play a single copy of Terraforming to get into my Lair of Darkness. Lair of Darkness is a really good card in this deck to be able to control your opponent's board by using their monsters to attributing their monsters for your card effects is really cool. 2 copies of Mind Control. I can't seem to find a room for the 3rd one. I might drop something, maybe Card Destruction for a 3rd one if you really feel strongly about playing 3, but I'm just playing 2 right now. You can drop, like I said, the Card Destruction for 1. 1 copy of Reasoning. The reason we don't play hand traps is because they have to call 1 in order for Reasoning to not resolve. Because I'm going to send all of my Infernoids to the graveyard to get this card to resolve, and I just need a couple of spells. Like, all these spells are toolbox in this deck. Like, it doesn't matter if you draw some of them or none of them. You're going to get your Infernoids into the graveyard with this deck. Then we play 3 copies of Monster Gate. Monster Gate is insane in this deck. You just have to tribute a monster to excavate cards off the top of your deck until you hit a monster that can be normal summoned or set. If you hit a monster that can't be normal summoned or set, like any of your Infernoids, you send them to the graveyard to fill up your graveyard with resources until you hit a Decatron. You have to hit a Decatron, or you keep milling cards, which is really powerful in this deck. 3 copies of Void Vanishment. Void Vanishment helps us search our copies of Void Imagination and our 1 of Void Feast. You can discard a card to add a Void spell or trap from your deck to your hand, so it's kind of like playing... It's really kind of like playing 4 copies of Void Feast, so it just is really good to be able to do, and it just helps so much. If an Infernoid monster you control battles an opponent's monster after damage calculation, you can send this card to the graveyard and banish both the monsters as well. So if you have a problematic card that your opponent has, you can send this to the grave and banish yours and your opponent's monster, which can really hurt them on resources, which can really help you out a lot. 3 copies of Void Imagination. It reduces your Infernoids' levels down to 1. Like, all of their levels are 1 because you don't want to have them on the field and have a bunch of Infernoids on the field that are high levels, because once you hit that cap of 8, you can't special summon any more of them until they're reduced by Void Imagination. So Void Imagination kind of gets rid of that penalty and puts them back down at level 1, so you can special summon as many as you want. But they take half the damage, and you can send this card to the graveyard to fusion summon an Infernoid monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your hand or your field as material. And if your opponent controls a monster that was special summoned from the extra deck, you can also use 6 monsters from your deck as fusion material as well. 3 copies of Lair. Lair of Darkness is really good because it changes all monsters on the field to dark, and then once per turn, you contribute a monster your opponent controls as if it was yours for the card effects of, like, your Infernoids and stuff like that. And it puts tokens on field as well, which can help us with link plays and all sorts of stuff like that. Called by the Grave just helps us with not getting hand trapped, and just hitting, their hand traps. And then 3 copies of Super Poly, which is crazy. This card is absolutely crazy when Lair is on the field, because you can use the new-ish Predaplant length or level 3, or the one that requires 3 darks, to send 3 monsters on their side of the field to the graveyard to summon that, and then it's like, okay, I have a 3000 beat stick. You can game them like that, because if you have Lair and Super Poly and they have 2 on the field, you go into your single copy of Starving Venom. If they have 3, you go into the one that takes 3 monsters. But if you don't have Lair, you go for Mud Dragon. So you have options there with Super Poly. Like, this card is so good in this deck. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. Or, in this case, trap. So we just play a single copy of Void Feast. Void Feast lets you send a Void spell or trap from your hand or face up from your field to the grave to special summon 3 Infernoid monsters from your deck whose total level exactly equal 8, ignoring their summoning conditions. So what you're going to want to do with this card is always summon Sajet and then 2 copies of Decatron, because that equals 8. And then your 2 copies of Decatron are going to be able to send 2 more cards from your deck to the graveyard, which is going to be your Deviati and your Anunku if you don't already have them. So it's going to kind of burn through 5 of your Infernoids and get them into the proper positions that you want to put them in. The only unfortunate thing is if you don't have Void Imagination on the field, this is as far as you can go until you start linking them away, which you can link away the 2 Decatrons if you don't have Lair on the field for something else, like a copy of or you can link all 3 of these away for like a Chaos Soldier if you want to, and then summon like Deviati and then burn all their back row, which is really cool. So this deck has a lot of plays in it, a lot of plays in it. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing 2 copies of the Infernoid Fusion Monster. This card is really good. I just played as a 2 of because I don't see myself going into it more than once. So I play it as a 2 of just in case like my opponent hits one of them and I got the space, so I might as well. It has 4 different effects depending on the amount of Infernoid monsters you put into it. If you put 3 into it, each player sends 3 cards from their extra deck to the graveyard, which is really good for us because we can send Elder Entity Nist to pop 3 cards on their side of the field, which we'll get into in a minute. 5, each player sends the top 3 cards of their deck to the graveyard, which is going to benefit us. 8 or more, each player returns 3 cards from their banish pile to their graveyard, which again helps us get our resources back. Or 10 or more, each player sends their entire hand to the graveyard, which again helps us because we're going to send our entire hand, which is going to dump all the Infernoids into the graveyard so we can start banishing stuff to put them on the field. But the thing is you have to have Void Imagination because this is a level 11 monster. You're going to need to have Void Imagination on the field, which you just sent to the graveyard to put this on the field. So you might need another Void Imagination. We play, for our Super Poly targets, we're going to be playing the copy of the Predaplant monster that takes 3 dark monsters, 1 copy of Starving Venom, and a Mud Dragon. These cards are all really good with Lair, or these 2 are good with Lair. This one's kind of when you don't have Lair. If you have Lair, you can still make Mud Dragon, but it's better to make the other 2 if you have Lair. 1 copy or 3 copies of Elder Entity Nist. This card's really good to send to the graveyard with your Infernoid Terra, the fusion monster, to be able to go into all different plays. 1 copy of Omega. You can, if your opponent doesn't have, if you have some resources that you feel like your opponent can keep for the moment, just send 2 of these to the grave and an Omega, because then you can just kind of deal with your opponent's cards and put stuff back in your graveyard. Boral Sword to OTK. Blackluster Soldier, because it's really easy to put high levels on the field in this deck. Crusadia Equalmax. This card is bonkers on the deck. Usually what I'll do is instead of going to Chaos Soldier, I'll go into this, but they're both kind of options. If I can't put a lot of monsters on board to boost this up, I'm going to put Chaos Soldier on the field. If I can put monsters under this card, I'm going to OTK my opponent. I'm going to put something like a copy of Semestus and Antidel under this and make it get really, really big. 1 copy of Nightmare Phoenix just to pop spells and traps. Fire Charmer Ablaze because it's a fire deck, and it does, if you don't have Lair, you need something. And Doolittle Chimera, because if you don't have Lair, you can boost up your monsters pretty big. And plus, you want to get some of your Infernoids off the field if you have them on the field, so you can get your other Infernoids on the field as well, once you've used up their abilities. Like, if you use up a Harmonic and an Anta or Antra, you want to get them off the field, you go Doolittle, send them to the graveyard, and then link into some, or banish them and summon something like Antidel, Semestus, or a Deviati, or something like that you might want to put on the field. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. It's a really, really good deck. I would not hesitate to carry this to a locals. I really would not hesitate to carry this to a regionals, and I really would not hesitate to carry this to any tournament, like at all. I would carry this to any tournament and attempt to top with this deck and probably get top 16, top 32 at least with this deck, if not win the tournament, because this deck is so control based and so good. Like, it's just a fun overall deck too to play around with, because the average person doesn't know how to play around this deck. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. It's a really fun deck to play with. I highly recommend that you give it a shot. Tell me what you think of this video down in the comments down below. Hit that bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See you around, guys.